Um, I said before, my name is Raimi Gbadamosi, and I'm an artist, which I often say both to inform people and to remind myself of this fact. And I'm just going to take you through quite a good number of images and just speak over the images. So I'm not going to necessarily spend too much time on each one because I just want to give an overview of what I do and hopefully provide a context to the exhibition at large within the museum. I'm also not going to speak directly about that. We'll speak about that later. This is the rehang, because you'll see that in real life, and if you can see it in real life, there's no point in reproducing it here. Okay. The first image that you can see at the moment is a flag of the Republic. I make work that deals with three main issues. I mean, there are more than those three, but there's a question of race, language, and power. I'm quite interested in these three, mainly because they're concepts, and they have had and have a profound impact on my existence. And they're all to do with belief structures to a certain extent, in that there is no defined way that one can argue that any of them exist. Lots of theories exist around these three, but one thing that is of great significance, especially when it comes to power, is that power is not a position, it's a state, although most people tend to treat it as a state, as a possession. The flag of the Republic, and the Republic is an independent state, and you can become citizens of the Republic by going to www.the-republic.net. And there you can read the Constitution, and I do suggest strongly read the Constitution before you sign up. But once you sign up, you become citizens of the Republic. So for those of you who only have one nationality, you can suddenly acquire another nationality altogether. This is a very early piece, which I'm deliberately included today to show sort of my interest in language for quite a while. I remember asking my fellow students at the time if they knew any racist words, and everyone said no. After pressing them, they all started revealing that they knew quite a lot. And so I made a small sort of dictionary, and then a larger piece, which was then installed, those two objects to the side. This was a very early piece in a laundrette called the Clean Machine. I quite like the fact that I was in a laundrette, because when people use words they're not supposed to, their mouth is washed out. So, a number of years ago, I was invited to put up a show in Glasgow. And for this show, I made a piece called Shrine. And Shrine is in response to Fela Anikulapo Kuti, who was a Nigerian musician. And for this, there were two spaces, one which was completely closed off, that you can see at the moment, and an adjoining space, which has the shrine, and part of Shrine is on show here at the moment, and this was completely open, this part of the gallery, so two separate galleries in one show. And in here, there was food, drink, and music by Fela Kuti was played all the time. And those people could sit and play these three games, which was Go, backgammon, and chess. These are three Manichaean games. One is supposed to be all about logic. The other one is just about chance. And the third one is a mixture of the two. I mean, it depends on how well you play to decide which is which. And there were a number of sessions, and politicians were invited to speak, and this was one of the collective sessions. I have made quite a number of postal works, and this is one of them. These works go all around the world, and this came as a set of three, and they went out in this order. It's strictly alphabetical. They end with a comma quite deliberately, so that by the time you get all three, you make a choice about the way you'd like to order them. But more importantly, they went out as postcards. And I'm quite interested in the nature of the post in of itself. I guess it's hard to make postal work without being interested in the post. But the way that, and even in fact now, you've all read these statements, and instinctively, or maybe not so, there'll either be a question of acceptance and rejection of what is being read. This is a piece called Repository of Memories. And as I said, I do make work around the issue of race and the question of race. And it is worth saying at this point that I do strongly believe, both intellectually and emotionally, that race is a construct. it does have a profound impact on the way that our lives are lived and the opportunities that we get, this construct. But in of itself, it isn't true. And it is one of those great contradictions that something which has no basis actually has such a profound impact. Even as people say it doesn't have a basis, it almost reinforces that impact. So anyway, back to repository of memories. And so for this, I decided that what would happen was a gallery would be filled with as little as possible and as much as possible simultaneously. So these are ribbons, and the language of ribbons become quite significant in the way that one reads that. This was at a time when ribbons were becoming increasingly a metaphor. So post the AIDS crisis, which has stayed with us for quite a while, ribbons just took on something new. In the beginning, ribbons were what you had when you received a birthday or Christmas present or something glorious. After a while, the language shifted completely. It wasn't about presents anymore, it was about remembrance. And I know that people do say that you tie a ribbon around your finger to remind you of something, but very, very rarely you see people doing that. So it's a combination of the two. I was invited to Liechtenstein to put on a show, and Liechtenstein is an amazing place. For those of you who've been, it's a tiny little country over there just between Austria and Switzerland that has a population of 30,000 people. To become a Liechtensteini, the easiest way to become a Liechtensteini, in fact, almost the only way to become a Liechtensteini, is if your father is a Liechtensteini. And if your father is Liechtensteini and you're born, then you're Liechtensteini. Otherwise, you have to wait till the age of 14, then a vote is made as to whether you'll be Liechtensteini or not. So I realized that this was all about semen in the end. So I made this piece called Drink, and which also includes all the sounds of water in Liechtenstein. Many years ago, in this room, you probably remember the nail bombs that went off all around London. And it was the first time that I ever really felt threatened by the violence that was going on in London and the bombings. I mean, the IRA were not going to come and blow up my house. I mean, that much I knew. But when the bombs went off in Brixton and Brick Lane and in Soho, I did actually feel threatened. And it made me think, and at the time it was interesting, the language that politicians used, which was about them and us, not the bombers. It was the people being bombed that were them. And I realized that, well, yes, I guess there is a particular type of status that someone like me holds within Britain. And how do I deal with this? So hence this piece. So this piece is 1 metric ton of nails. And it is 1.5 of my height and my width. And I invited people to take a nail, and people did, as mementos. Made very little difference to the amount of nails, really. This is a pill. I was invited to be an artist in West Dean, and in West Dean is a college where people are trained to restore old things. So high method, and they knew how to make things. So I arrived slightly anachronistic with regards to this. The idea that I would spend 6 months putting an old vase together, just the thought now, just makes me feel quite unwell. But this is what these students did. So I made a series of games that had no rules and they could just play with, which they did. Very quick foray into some of my curatorial activity as well as my own visual practice. I curated a series of shows called When in Rome, and there were 5 of them. At the time, this is one of my pieces, and it's called A Year of Days. As you probably are aware, there are 2 pieces of legislation here, the Anti-Terrorism Act. For the first time in British history, on British soil, it is now possible to put people under house arrest. Now, house arrest is an oxymoron. If you're guilty, you're tried, you're put in prison. If you're innocent, the government should leave you alone. House arrest says, well, we're not sure what to do with you, but we will imprison you. So it's actually a type of false imprisonment, which is a crime in of itself. So anyway, but I did decide that if you were stuck in your house because you were put under house arrest, you would need to read something. So all these books contain all the seconds and all the hours and all the minutes of a day. And there are 366 books because you never know, you might be stuck in there for a leap year. And so each day you take out a book, you read it, and you put it back. That's one way to bide your time. That's a piece called Lost Envelopes that you've just seen, but this is going to take place over 15 minutes. This is me being an ambassador of the Republic, and here people could exchange for 1 unit of currency for an identity card of the Republic, which they did. And just, you can see someone staring at them. Those are the little plastic cards, just like normal ID cards. In Britain, they're £1. I've had this in the US, and they're $1. And once in Spain, so euro, they're always a unit of whatever the currency of that country is. A piece called Ceremonial Arcade, where I was invited to put on a show, but thought, again, what does it mean to exhibit? How does power make itself manifest? So in this instance, I made 3 flags, which were hung in the gallery. And when people came, there was a quite deliberate, big opening for the event. But then they arrived and couldn't see the work, because people accepted a flag for what it was, as an accoutrement of power, rather than as something that was being exhibited. It's called Back Game. I put on a show called Child's Play, and for that, I decided to go, an attempt at regression. What is language for an individual before language takes on meaning, if one imagines this? So I set myself an impossibility. I already know what language is for me. I know how it functions. So obviously, in order for me to go back, I'm always going to be caught within the trap of language. And yet it was quite fun putting on a show called Child's Play. And in this show, so the 3 pieces against the back wall that you can see, it's a circle, but each of those rings and the circle in the middle cover the same area. And so they're kind of these visual anomalies at play. The piece on the ground, again, back to Nels, is called Playpen. And you can, in fact, play in the pen quite safely without any difficulty. Failure. For the exhibition, I commissioned a writer to write a children's book because I didn't want to write the book and produce the drawings. I wanted someone to respond. But then on the day, up to the day, and even up to presently, the book has not been written, which interested me quite a lot. How does a work of art function? What is its role? How do we decide whether something is a success or not? So the 18 drawings for that particular book were put on show too. That was a sign made to deal with the way I felt. I still feel about making art. I'm quite singular about it. I am ambivalent. I often have to remind myself that no one's really going to die from my shows. Okay, they may fall into the nails and impale themselves, but apart from that, normally nothing much is going to happen. This is an exhibition. Increasingly, I've become interested in what it takes, amongst my other issues to do, again, with power. What does it take to put on an exhibition? What does it take to alter space? How do I get an idea across in kind of with an economy of means? Through time, one begins to realize that simplicity is one of the hardest things to arrive at. You have to remove everything you consider extraneous. So for this show, what I did, 3 busts were made of me. I made 3 flags, and the gallery, and this similar rendition of this piece is on show here, where there was very little in the gallery in of itself. But the gallery was altered completely in relationship to the codes of power. Now, if you didn't know me, you would simply see those heads, and heads already represent power. And I gave 2 performances to do with Machiavelli's writings. One was the Prince, and the other was the Discourses. And this was the Discourses, because the Prince is about the ruler. The Discourses is how the individual, in fact, wrests power from the state. That's a piece with Fordham Gallery, and this is the last piece. This is a piece called Creative Exchange in Belfast. And for this show, I changed the whole gallery into an exchange, effectively. So each day, there were 3 slots, and members of the public could do anything they wanted in the gallery. So a wedding took place in the gallery, amongst other things. The local government used it for a number of meetings. And the only condition was it had to be returned to the state that it was in as an exhibition. So they could fold the flag, they could put in screens, as long as at the end of the day it returned. I also commissioned some new pieces for that and made a film called This is a Fiction, which relates to the Troubles to a certain extent in Belfast. And this is the coat of arms of the Republic. And as I said, if you want to become a citizen, you know where to go. And the coat of arms goes everywhere I go, because you need to take your arms with you wherever you go. And that's it. I will stop, and now you can come and speak.